Hey everyone, and welcome to another discussion on The Rational National. I'm joined now by journalist Eoin Higgins, who you can check out at his Substack at owenhiggins.substack.com. Owen spelled Eoin. Owen, welcome to the show.
David, thanks for having me again. Appreciate it.
So let's talk Tucker Carlson and what he's been doing to try and appeal to the working class while also getting so-called left wingers or progressives and trying to use them as well to try and speak to a larger audience. So I guess what have you noticed with Tucker? What is your sort of your overall perspective on him, and what is his project has been over the last, I would say, several years?
Yeah, I mean those are those are pretty big questions. We did a an episode of my podcast last week with Sana Saeed and Nikki McCann Ramirez from Media Matters. Sana's from AJ Plus, and also Jonathan Katz when we talked about how Tucker has kind of used his kind of borrowed legitimacy with certain corners of the left to portray himself as an anti-war voice. And he's doing that right now with respect to this kind of back and forth with Ukraine and Russia that's going on, where Carlson opposes U.S. intervention in the conflict, which I agree with that. I think that's the right position to have. Uh, but it has kind of translated into him seeming to have legitimacy as an anti-war voice, which I disagree with. And here I'll actually cite what Nikki said during our conversation, which was that you know being against the war in Ukraine is not a particularly novel approach. Like that's not, you're not really bucking the trend here. Um, you know,
Mm-hmm.
Poll after poll shows that the American people are just not interested. I just saw one that said, everyone under the age of 65, a plurality or even a majority, I think, does not want the U.S. to get involved with this. Like,
Mm-hmm.
because everyone understands, of course, that the potential for a nuclear war or some other like major conflict is going to escalate if the U.S. was to directly get involved with this conflict between Russia and one of its bordering states. So, there, him taking this position may seem to some people like he's presenting an anti-war perspective, but in reality, it's more that he's just kind of less interested in war with Russia and more interested in kind of making a one front war where China is really
Mm-hmm.
the target. And so it's not that he's anti-war. It's not that he's against war. It's not that he's against the U.S. military just basically doing whatever it wants around the world. It's that he's specifically opposed to them spending time on this conflict because, in his view, the correct conflict to get involved with is with China.
Yeah, and he's able to play this kind of role, I think, partially because, and I think you've mentioned this as well, there are very few any anti-war voices on cable news in terms of actual hosts that are, on MSNBC or CNN. So by him coming out and being clearly anti-war with Russia, that makes him appear to some as, oh, this guy's anti-war, even though you look at his history. I mean, didn't he support the Iraq War? Like, this guy is not, doesn't have a history of being a
Yeah,
big anti-war activist. But he's able to sort of play this role, right? Because there is no real equivalent of him in any sense in terms of the anti-war message on other networks. Is that right?
well, I don't know. I don't know if I would say that's completely right. I mean, just to back it up to his support for the Iraq War. I mean, just so people understand, it wasn't just that he supported the war. I mean, he was saying, well after the invasion had just completely collapsed into the chaos that everybody predicted that it would. He was saying, he was on the Bubba the Love Sponge radio show saying that Iraqis were this is his quote, semi-literate primitive monkeys, and that they should, quote, shut the fuck up and obey, close quote. and obey the U.S. occupation and whatever the U.S. want to do. I mean, this is not the words of a guy who is interested in an anti-war position for an anti-war position's sake. I mean, this is a guy who, in this case, is specifically against this war for a reason, right? So, but yeah, I think that as far as MSNBC and CNN go, both of which, by the way, Tucker used to work for, um, they have a pretty antagonistic approach to Russia in general, and a pretty pro-security state approach in general. This is we see this with the conspiracy theory kind of stuff that Rachel Maddow's been doing for like the last 6 years. With Nicole Wallace, who is a former Bush communications shop person in the press office there, who now has her own 2-hour show where she spends at least half of it going after Russia. And it's been relentless, especially on MSNBC, which has been like the all Russia channel for years.
Yeah.
And they've been drumming this up. So it really is kind of counter to their programming and counter to the audience that they have cultivated for them to say anything other than go to war with Russia, or to strongly imply that is the correct position. As far as CNN goes, I mean, they are probably like a little bit less blatant about it in the same way, but they are. I mean, both of these networks are completely consumed by having people in the security state, or formerly in the security state, as contributors, as people who come out and offer their expertise. So everything that you see on MSNBC and CNN is kind of filtered through this view. But having said that, there are a few hosts on there, Mehdi Hassan, Eoin, both of whom are much closer to the progressive line on conflict and war than the mainstream hosts. I think, I don't really know what Chris Hayes' position on this is, but he's kind of a lost cause at this point. But Eamon and Mehdi are pretty good, and yeah, I think that the lack of a strong anti-war position on really any like mainstream primetime show, like it's not like it was like in the back end of the Bush years where these networks were pretending that they were opposed to war, or at least like kind of winking at it because they knew that there was money to be made by appealing to that audience. At this point, that doesn't really exist. So someone like Carlson is able to present this isolationist anti-China position as an anti-war position, and of course he has a lot of useful idiots to do that work for him.
Yeah, so let's talk about some of those useful idiots. Like, what is to help people, I guess, maybe understand if they're understand the intentions here, to better understand why these people are out there doing this. What do you think is the motivation behind this sort of recycling of Tucker Carlson and turning him into this sort of anti-war working class hero by these people who used to have a little more, human rights, pro-human rights, pro-working class ideas and opinions, but have since turned a lot more to recycling conservative garbage? Like, what do we know what motivates this desire to want to recycle this kind of conservative crap, or is there just no, is it not clear what those motivations are?
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'm cynical, but my perspective on this is that their entire motivation is simply they want to get on Tucker because getting on Tucker exposes them to the largest audience on cable news, which they readily admit. But I don't buy their excuse that they're doing it to get this message out to the masses. No, they're doing it to get more exposure, to get more views, to get more subscribers. I mean, it's purely about. I kind of dislike this term, but it is about clout chasing, and it's about money. I mean, that's all that it is, and they're very aware that I mean, this has been made very clear. There was that guy who did the interview with him a few years ago where it didn't air, but it was very clear why it didn't air, because he challenged Tucker.
Mm.
If you challenge Tucker on the air, it's not happening. Like
Yeah.
he's not going to have you back on, and so uh, the the incentives to present Tucker to the audience, to your audience, as some sort of like working class hero or some anti-war voice are very clear. And I think that that is exactly what's going on here. It is really disappointing to see a lot of these people make that move and make that choice. But they are making it, and I think, in my opinion, to look at it as motivated by anything other than their own self-promotion and gain would be a mistake.
And at the same time, these individuals, blanketly slam mainstream media, which all of us do, but they don't include the biggest primetime host in cable news in that group. Like, it's so ridiculous to try and claim the media's lying to you. Meanwhile, here I am on Tucker talking about, agreeing with him on his various positions. Like, it's so disingenuous to claim that he is somehow outside of that when Tucker is, apart from being incredibly wealthy and he's going to inherit like a ton of money, he's someone that clearly has had a very, white nationalist message, and they don't appear to find an issue with this. Like, this is also what helps to expose that this really is all about just self-preservation and bring people to their own audiences or to their own, Substack or YouTube, whatever it is. It's because if they actually cared about human rights, cared about equal rights, cared about the working class, they would be willing to call out a lot of that white nationalist garbage that Tucker recycles, that puts out there on a regular basis. But they don't challenge that because they claim, oh, it's a way for me to get out my message. But your message, when it's in line with Tucker's message, maybe there's a problem there. So I don't know. It's just it is. I agree with you. It's been sad. It's been weird to see some of these people who I once respected, Glenn Greenwald being, I mean, the obvious person there, just now kind of put themselves out there as this person that is just helping to recycle Tucker's image and all the garbage he puts out there on a regular basis. It's the whole thing is just depressing.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think, Glenn is obviously probably the most high profile guest with who still has like some cachet on the left, who goes on Tucker's show. I mean, like, obviously, he's one of the most famous journalists in the world, and his excuses for Tucker's actions just don't really hold a lot of water. They don't really make a lot of sense. I think that as far as the others, I think that they just kind of are watching the success that Glenn has had. Certainly based a lot on the work that he's done and the all the work that he's done journalistically, and all the work that he's done to become a pundit who's taken seriously. But at the same time, they are making their decision. These other people to portray Tucker as like you were saying, like in touch with the working class, which again is just ridiculous. I mean, this guy is the heir to like the Swanson TV dinner fortune. He's never had to struggle for anything in his life as far as money or career goes. I mean, he doesn't even need to be doing this. I mean, that's the thing too, is he does not need to be doing this to make money. He could just sit and be 100 millionaire, billionaire, whatever. So I mean, that raises some questions about why he's doing it. To which I don't really have the answer, but like a lot of these people who go on Tucker are the same. I mean, Matt Taibbi is the son of a very successful investigative journalist who went to a private school and then was just kind of like nepotismed his way into the positions that he got into. And again, like, Matt is very talented. I'm not taking that away from him, but he doesn't really have an understanding of what it's like to actually have to work for a living. Same with Max Blumenthal. This is the guy. He's the son of Sid Blumenthal, an aide to Bill and Hillary Clinton, big person in the Democratic establishment and has been since Max was a child or at least a teenager. He's also the nephew of the senior senator from Connecticut, Richard Blumenthal. I mean, he is like Democratic Party establishment royalty, or at least like a member of the court, right?
Yeah.
And on and on. You know, Jimmy Dore's dad owned a construction company, blah blah blah, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
I
So
will say though, even if they have this in the background and that kind of thing, if they were fighting for the right issues, I wouldn't really care all that much about where they
no,
come
no,
from
no.
and their experiences.
Let me be sorry. Let me be really clear about this.
Yeah.
Like I'm not bringing this up to say that necessarily invalidates anything that they're saying. I'm bringing it up to say that the shtick of like only we understand the working class and only we are speaking to like the real American and only only we get what like red state people really care about, like blah blah blah, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, it just
Yeah. That's
their
complete bullshit.
backgrounds are not those backgrounds, and so
Yeah.
you can't, again. I mean, I really need to stress that I think that that line of attack by itself, like absent any context as to what they're doing, is just not something that has any credibility.
Yeah.
But I do think that it has credibility when they are trying to portray themselves as something that they are not, and I think that that needs to be called out, and especially like. I mean, with Tucker, it's the same thing. I mean, it's just like very, very wealthy, elite member of the upper class who is now, talking to you, the common man, and but he's not. He's not.
Yeah.
He doesn't know anything as far as that goes, and so I think that it's important to put that context in when you're talking about not only him but also the people who are working to kind of launder his image. Like you have to put them in perspective because it may change the way that you feel about them.